because Trump is not done now that the EU deal is done. China is up next. Make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications.
U.S. Trade delegations. We are,
I'm
aren't they? They're not very appetizing, are they?
The meatballs here were meatball-colored meatballs, but they were smaller than I was expecting. They were like the size of a dime. Came in a very heavy sauce and with some very heavy potatoes with them. It was very filling. I enjoyed them a lot, but you don't need to eat for like a day and a half after you eat those.
Okay. Should we have waited to the end to talk about what can you tell us? And then we won't have to talk about
what you guys have seen, right? Yeah, what we know is what you guys have seen. We saw the Chinese delegation, the Vice Premier He Lifeng arriving, and then just moments after that, we saw Treasury Secretary Bessent arrive. We saw a lengthy greeting with the Prime Minister of Sweden as Secretary Bessent shook his hand and had some conversation for a few moments out on the street. And then all sides proceeded indoors. They're here at the Prime Minister's residence in Sweden. And the idea is they're going to spend about 2 days behind the scenes. What they're going to come up with, we don't know. We saw Jameson Greer, the U.S. trade representative, on television earlier today, really lowering expectations for these trade talks today, saying maybe they can get an extension of that August 12th deadline. And that seems to be sort of like the bar for these talks right now, is if they can get that extension, that'll be seen as at least a base hit for these talks, and then maybe set up some talks later in the fall between Xi Jinping and President Trump, Joe.
Yeah, it's coming.
So let me break down to you guys how negotiations work. All right. And I've done this before. So shout out to the bag chasers. And I've talked about it on this channel. But I want to make sure that I give y'all some insight so that y'all will be able to make better decisions. And maybe you can read The Art of the Deal. Y'all should really get Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. It's a really great book. But this is how negotiations usually work. You have to make sure that you get big deals and big concessions, which is one of the reasons why the European Union deal and the Japanese deal and every other deal that they've done so far. And you want to take your time in getting the right deal struck. Well, why? Because it sets it off as a precedent and the blueprint for how you are going to structure other deals. So, for example, China does not want to see what they are doing over there at the European Union, because now they have to follow in that similar blueprint. And because the United States of America is the one that has all the leverage. We have all the leverage. Anton, remind them of how we have all the leverage. The reason why we have all of the leverage is because of you guys. Oh, I'm going to break it down again from a C student's perspective. It's because of you. Well, what does that mean? We are the biggest consumers in the world. We buy everything. We finance everything. We make sure that we spend every dollar that we can in order to make sure that we please other people and show off. And because of that, we need all of the products. We need all of the goods. We need all of the services, and we love it, especially the liberals. Especially the liberals. Liberals love to basically suck off other countries. They stood with Iran. They stand with Ukraine and Russia, depending on which side of the fence they're on at that particular time and who's the president. Oh, they stood with China. China. They stood with Canada. They stood with Mexico. And so what they are advocating for on the consumer side, which they don't even realize that they're actually playing into the conservative or Trump's hands, is that gives us more leverage and buying power, because those are huge exporter nations, meaning that they ship all of their products over here in order for their businesses to be sustainable. And so because we say, well, listen, we're not buying any more of your products, it puts a huge hole on a country like China, who is trying to prop itself up with shiny buildings and subsidized cars. Listen, don't think for 1 second that these Chinese vehicles that they are making for cheap, that is subsidized by their government in order to export it to the rest of the world, and we not allowing for that to happen here in the United States of America because Trump is smart enough to make sure that he protects our manufacturers, that for 1 second is covering up what we know in the economic field and in all of the stock market and everybody that understands exactly what's going on in China. We know that their real estate market is collapsing. And so what they do is that they leverage their exporter capabilities in order to prop up the real estate side of it, because while they are a communist-ish company or country, they're not actually generating revenue unless they take advantage of other countries. And so what you see other countries doing, and why they are so involved in Africa and why they are so involved in other countries, and you see them and you say, well, why is it so many Chinese people taking over Africa? Why are there so many Chinese companies popping up over in Africa? And Africa just gave away everything, right? We're going to give you these crazy loans, Africa. And in turn, we're going to build roads for you, Africa. And Africa went, so many different places in Africa just went head over heels. Okay, Chinese, we'll take everything from you. And just sucked everything off. Now they own you. They own everything. They own the infrastructure. They own the logistics. They own the export, import. And so instead of them bolstering their own country with their own products, what they basically did was sold out. And so now the Chinese gave them cheap products and bribes and a couple little dollars, and y'all politicians sold y'all out over there, similar to what the Democrats was doing to us here in the United States of America. And now they own everything over there, and they're using their resources and their infrastructure in order to boost the fortunes of their own country. And any industry that you had is basically being subverted over into whatever it is that they're exporting over into your place. And so you sold your soul for 15 cents on the dollar because you had some crooked politicians and you had some temporary influx of money that came into it, and now they own you. Kind of sort of the same thing that happened in Chicago streets. This is an economic lesson that I'm giving to you. Same thing that happened in Chicago streets. The minute that you got into a bind, and oh my God, it's the crisis. Now they own your streets for 75 years. You sold it to them for $1 billion, and they're going to make $1 billion at least per year for the next 75 years. And you can't even run a parade down the street without getting permission from an outside resource that actually, from an outside country that owns the streets of Chicago, own every parking meter, own every parking spot. You got to pay a fee to put a parade up. Crazy, right? And so the name of the game is ownership. But when we finally got a president that stood in office and said, well, listen, we're going to use the leverage that we have against you in order to have a better trade deal. Now China has to come to the front of the congregation. The EU had to come to the front of the congregation. Canada had to come to the front of the congregation and stand down. Mexico had to come to the front of the congregation. You know why? Because we are the biggest consumers. And when you buy everything and people are looking to sell to you, they'll do anything in order to maintain that relationship. Anything to maintain that relationship.
Fast and furious, though, after Japan last week and then in the EU, it would be, I don't know whether it's more likely or less likely with the pace that things are happening.
It's a really good question, right? To what extent does that EU deal yesterday influence what's going on here in Sweden with the Chinese today? You've got to think that the economies of the U.S. and China are so big, and this set of talks is on its own trajectory, that it's got its own momentum. But everybody here is aware of what happened yesterday in Scotland. So clearly, people are paying attention. For the Chinese perspective, this is transformational for their economy. And so I think they'll proceed very cautiously here. And no one is bracing for any major breakthroughs today or tomorrow. But we're here on the scene. If they get a breakthrough, we'll let you know.
Yeah. I was struck. Those communists drive some nice.
If you guys want us to take you seriously, we invite all conversations. We love having the conversation with you guys. We think that the chat is the backbone of what we do. You got to get a profile picture or else we're going to think you're jerking off in your socks. You got to get a profile picture or else we're going to think you're jerking off inside of your socks. That's just the way the game goes, baby. That's the way the game goes.